What is up, everyone? Matt here with Down Once More. It is time to talk about episode 9, the season finale of The Last of Us, titled Look for the Light. So, we knew this moment was coming. Right off the bat, I want to say there will be full spoilers for this episode, the season finale, all of season 1 of The Last of Us, and for the entire game of The Last of Us Part 1. We closed out the game, we closed out the season. It's all on the table. I'm not going to spoil things from the game part 2. I will in a future video, so make sure you're subscribed and stay tuned for that. But we're just going to talk about this episode now and then some kind of thoughts on the season as a whole. I thought that this episode was one of the strongest season finales of any TV season that I've seen. Right off the bat, I'm going to say that. I thought that they did such a faithful job adapting the ending of the game. So much of this dialogue is pulled directly from the game into the series, and it translated so well. Part of the reason is because the Last of Us game is such a narrative and cinematic game in and of itself. So it does, as we talked about in one of these earlier videos, it does lend itself very well to a TV adaptation more than other games. Um, this episode opened up with Ashley Johnson, who voiced Ellie in the games and did all the mocap for and everything like that, with her as Ellie's mom, Anna, running through the woods, heavily pregnant, going to a Firefly farmhouse. She's expecting people there. No one's there. She runs to the top room, gives birth to Ellie as she is fighting off and kills a runner and gets bit on the thigh, she finds out. After that happens, cuts the umbilical cord and just holds Ellie, names her Ellie. Ashley Johnson is fantastic as Ellie in the games. She is a fantastic voice actress, and she absolutely crushed this role of Anna. And I thought it was awesome to be able to see her in this role as someone who basically gave birth to Ellie in the games and originated that. To be able to play her mom in this and have that connection, almost like a passing the torch kind of scene, was awesome. I loved it. The one thing that took me out of it is hearing her moan and kind of groan, and as she's fighting off the infected, just those sounds just took me right back to the game because she sounds the exact same. It was something I thought it wasn't as noticeable with Troy Baker as James in the last episode. I was blanking on his name there for a second in it. He did a little bit of his Joel voice, but not entirely, so it still differentiated the characters. Ashley Johnson just sounded like a slightly older Ellie, and that's just because of time that's passed as well. She had the switchblade, kind of confirmed that the switchblade Ellie carries was her mom. And we get our first explanation, kind of why Ellie's immune. That's never really covered in the games. It's not a spoiler for part 2. It's just a fact. It's not covered in the games why Ellie's immune. We just know she's immune. They're going to run some tests on her, right? And that's what they were going to do at the hospital there in Salt Lake City. Here we find out it's very strongly hinted in the beginning that it was because Anna was bit as she was giving birth to Ellie and the umbilical cord was still attached. And that's why when Marlene comes across Anna, Anna stresses, she says that she cut the umbilical cord before she was bit because she doesn't want Marlene to think that Ellie could be infected. So that's when we see Anna and Marlene are talking. They've known each other their whole lives, they say. Sounds like they grew up together. They've been going through everything in this apocalypse, this pandemic, went through everything together. And Anna charges Marlene with taking Ellie to Boston and finding someone to care for her and giving her the knife. And then Anna asks Marlene to kill her before she turns. Marlene says she can at first, then goes back and does it. And she tells the one Firefly that's holding Ellie to cover her ears while Marlene shoots Anna. And it cuts to him right as she takes the shot, and he's not fucking covering her ears. Like, kind of a dick move, but whatever. You do you, dude. Luckily, Ellie doesn't have hearing issues, you dick. So I was surprised. I thought we were just gonna get the Anna giving birth and holding Ellie and seeing that she was bit. I thought that was all we were gonna get on the flashback. I because after that it cut to the title sequence and song and theme, and then it cut back to Marlene and the Fireflies coming on the building and coming on Anna and Ellie, which it was neat to see. It gives some more depth to what Marlene's going through at the end of the episode about Ellie basically sacrificing Ellie and seeing that connection she had to Anna and that the promise that she'd made to take care of Ellie and how she's kind of going back on that, but to save humanity and how she's able to make that sacrifice for the greater good while Joel isn't. But at the same time, I thought it could have ended just with Anna giving birth to Ellie and holding that. And I will say, after the birth scenes we've gotten from HBO this year on House of the Dragon, or I guess technically that would have been last year in 2022, but this was a very mild birth scene. And that's for someone being attacked by an infected runner and killing them and giving birth and that shit. So HBO's just all in on their birth scenes this year. Um, but I did enjoy that flashback. I like getting more of that story. Neil Druckmann, the pictures of Ashley Johnson as Anna, HBO posted them themselves this week leading up to it, and we'd seen it in the trailers going into it. I kind of wish they wouldn't have. I kind of wish they would have let people just be surprised and see that to lead up with it. Neil Druckmann had also tweeted out a poster that was The Last of Us American Daughters. And it was a pregnant lady with a jacket and a gas mask on her face in the apocalypse, just standing there. It's a comic cover, which was an Easter egg in Uncharted 4 in the I think it was in the epilogue of that this comic was presented. The comic was never actually created when that was put out. That was before The Last of Us Part 2 came out. People thought it was maybe a tease that maybe for the second game we were going to play as Ellie's mom, go through that, which we didn't, but it does give you an interesting idea of what they could do and ways they expanded of it. I like how Neil Druckmann got to get that part of the story into the series. In the after show at the end, Craig Mazin was talking about how Neil had told him about this part, and he's like, we absolutely have to include that in the finale. We have to put that scene in the series. And I am glad they did. It was very neat to see, and also to give Ashley Johnson that role. After that, we go to Joel and Ellie. After the events of last episode with David and Ellie having to go basically feral to protect herself and to take that anger and frustration off of the creep that was David, she's kind of more quiet, reserved, shut down. I think it's a little bit about everything that she's had to go through and then knowing what's to come with that kind of almost basically the weight of the world on her shoulders of knowing that she is immune. They want to use it to make the cure. Her already being discouraged about that because of her failure to save Sam when she tried to do that in episode 5, and just not knowing what's going to happen and not knowing what's going to happen with her and Joel. And I'll hands up, I was wrong. I thought they were going to not include the drafts in the finale, even though that is a very big part, and getting to see that joy on Ellie's face and what she's going through and kind of a glimmer of hope for things, how things could be after all Ellie's been through, that she's not completely beaten down right now. She can still find joy in things. She can still laugh. And the whole conversation that Joel and Ellie have then, I thought it might get cut because in episode 2, it lingered on the shot of the stuffed giraffe. And I thought that was going to be their nod to it, their cameo, which I hinted at in my review and my thoughts on episode 2, but I didn't want to give away spoilers, so I didn't mention it fully. I'm glad they left that scene in. I think it's really neat to show that dynamic between Joel and Ellie. And like I said, that she's not completely broken down. She's still in there after all that she's been through and all she's done. They, like I said, so many things were shot for shot, line for line from the game, which I think that brings me to one of the problems I have with video game adaptations. Everyone wants good video game well, I won't say everyone. There are people who are disappointed when this was announced because the game is so almost holy to them. It holds such a special place in their heart and their lives, and it's done so well, and you get so much more time with those characters than you do in the show, right? That they were worried about how it would be adapted. And I feel like, in a way, doing a video game adaptation is a little bit of a lose lose. If you adapt it 100% faithful to the game, people who played the game are going to know what's going to happen, and you're not going to be able to meet that level and top what you got in the game, right? And if you completely change things and butcher it, then they're going to be pissed that you change things and it's not the same as what the game was. I will say, like, honestly, where I had played the game fairly recently, know everything that's going to happen. Those moments, and in the finale, Joel's decision, his conversations with Ellie, where it was so faithful to the game, I watching it play out didn't have as much of an impact on me because I had played those moments through in the game and had that impact, having to make those choices, having to make those decisions. I mean, you don't get a choice. You have to make those decisions one way or the other. But so I thought where this series really shined was when they added things and made it their own. So the Bill and Frank episode, for example, the intro, the prologue to this episode with Anna, and then like expanding on Henry and Sam and all of their backstory, creating that for the series. I thought those were the parts that really impacted me more and I thought were really awesome. Same with some of Tommy and Joel's conversations in Jackson. And I could be completely off. I don't remember in the game Joel talking about his scar and it being because he tried to end his life the day after Sarah was shot and killed. Um, I was trying to think back, and because of the time, I didn't go watch the gameplay to fully refresh my memory. I know there's some time when Ellie and Joel are going through the army tents. We're trying to look for scraps, parts, all that fun stuff that you do in a video game where they're having some dialogue, but I wasn't remembering that those exact plots. And in the series, they're having that conversation. Joel tells him that the guy who shot him and missed was himself. Um, and he's talking through it. And Ellie says, well, I guess time does heal all wounds. And Joel just looks at her and says, it wasn't time that did it, which is obviously implying and telling her that it was her. It was that building that bond with her and being able to protect her and what they had built and how they'd grown together is what helped him heal from everything with Sarah and her dying. And you can see that realization wash across Ellie's face, which said it almost every episode. Bella Ramsey is perfect as Ellie. They are so good in this role. And I'm excited to see what they can do in season 2. I think it's going to be interesting because the game, there's a 4-year time jump. But Bella Ramsey is 19 right now, anyways. So by the time they film it, and different hairstyles can do wonders and makeup to make someone look older. So I'm not too worried about it. They also might not jump the full 4 years. There's certain things in the second game that kind of require that big of a time jump, but you could switch things around a little bit and still make it work. So, and if this is the first one of these you're watching, I don't do full recaps of the episode. There's full spoilers, so I'm assuming you have watched the episode. I'm not going to spoil it for you. One thing that they cut, and that I know has been a criticism of this series, is the lack of infected. Both from game fans and non-game fans. And for the most part, I've disagreed with it. Ultimately, this is a story about the people, right? It's about that theme of love, what they're going through, and basically the things people will do for love, one way or the other. But I said it the last, eh, yeah, I said it the last episode with David and Ellie fighting the infected. I thought that should have been included because it makes more sense why David just lets her go. And then I'll say it here in the game when they're on their way to the hospital, Joel and Ellie are in the tunnels, and there are so many infected, and they're fighting through those. And then there's a flooded tunnel they're trying to escape from. And that's when the Fireflies end up getting them because Ellie's trying to save Joel because he's trapped in this bus that's flooding in the flooded tunnels. And a big thing in the game, first game, is Ellie can't swim, so you constantly have to pull fucking pallets for her to jump on and drag her across things. Um, so she's trying to save Joel, gets knocked out and is in the water, and he's trying to revive her. And soldiers come with gunpoint. He's keep giving her CPR, and they bash him on the head, and that's when he wakes up in the Fireflies hospital. So I I get it. I get that you don't want to spend the budget on the infected. You don't want to waste time on that when you're trying to turn a 20 plus hour game into essentially a 10-hour series. And so you've got to cut things out. I get it. But my problem with that is in this world, in this universe, the infected don't seem like nearly as much of a threat. They are not present hardly at all. You get it in passing. And I get that everything's been going on for 20 years. So ultimately, it's not like as soon as you die of natural causes, you don't turn into an infected. You have to get infected from someone from being bit um, or eating something contaminated. I would assume is still the case. But I I don't know. I feel like them not being a threat kind of doesn't fully flesh out this world. I think there should be more infected thrown in there. I'll be interested to see what happens in season 2. I mean, they had a good sized budget for the series, so budget restraints, I don't think, or constraints, whichever one you want to use, um, I don't think is the main reason. But I get that criticism. It doesn't ruin the show for me by any means, but I get it. I would have liked to see some more infected in this series as a whole. I think besides episode 5, there was one here, one there, none anywhere. So we'll see. Um, I said that we got some hints as to why Ellie was immune. At the very end of this, when Marlene's talking, she says that the doctor thinks that the cordyceps, they have grown with Ellie since birth, and it had created like a chemical messenger that may communicates with normal cordyceps and makes them think that Ellie's one of theirs. So they're going to remove the cells, multiply the cells, and then produce the chemical messengers in a lab, and so they can give it to everyone and hopefully then have a cure. Then that's when Joel comes to the realization cordyceps are in the brain, that they're going to have to kill Ellie to get these. And just like in the game, he makes the choice between potentially saving humanity and saving Ellie. And in the after show, Neil Druckmann says like that's the easiest decision he's ever made. He's ever had to make was to save basically now his surrogate daughter. And I loved how they shot and how this scene was directed of Joel taking out the Fireflies and fighting to Ellie. They basically lowered the levels of all the gunshots, everything going on, and the score is in the forefront. And you're getting that score as they're fighting through. You're seeing the brutality of Joel in this as you see Firefly surrendering, lowering their gun, raising their hands. He still just shoots them point blank. Runs out of ammo after he's already shot someone, but they're not dead. He gets his knife and goes and finishes them off. And as soon as he gets to the operating room, and he tells them the doctor, and there's two nurses standing there and one sitting in the corner. and he tells them to unhook her. And the doctor says he's not going to let Joel take her, and Joel, without hesitation, just shoots him right in the head. So, in the game, you can hesitate to shoot him, but then Joel goes up and gets a scalpel and stabs him and kills him. So it's not like you can save the doctor. The doctor is dead. And so we just see that Joel does spare the nurses, though. And fun fact, a little Easter egg, Laura Bailey, who voiced and did the mocap for Abby in part 2, she played one of those nurses there at the end of the scene. So I thought that was really neat. I like how they pulled in a lot of the voice actors and everything from the game. Like we had Merle Dandridge, who played Marlene. She did it in the games and she did it in the series. I thought that was awesome. And so they've really allowed people who were in the game world, gave them the opportunity to play characters in the series, even though it may not be who they were in the game. So I thought that was awesome. I overall, I love this episode. It was a fantastic finale, way to close everything out. We get ultimately when Joel is having the dialogue and the back and forth with Marlene, and he tells her that she doesn't get to make the decision if Ellie lives or dies to try to save everyone. Marlene tells Joel he doesn't either. That should be Ellie's decision, and she knows what Ellie would choose. She would want to save everyone, sacrifice herself. And that's the conversation Ellie and Joel have by the drafts, right? Is that they've come this far after everything they've done. Ellie doesn't want it to be for nothing, that they have to see it through. And ultimately, Joel makes what is a selfish decision for himself because he has imbued all of his fatherhood, that paternal love, onto Ellie, and he can't bear to lose another daughter, even if it means dooming everyone else. And at the season, the episode, it all ends with Ellie telling Joel about Riley and how she was the first one that died, and then it was Tess, and then it was Sam, and Joel tries to tell her it wasn't her fault, and he's explaining how they just find a way and you keep moving on. And Ellie asks Joel to swear to her that what he told her about the Fireflies is true, and he swears it, and she just says okay. And Bella Ramsey was talking in the after show, and they said that ultimately Ellie knows deep down that Joel is lying to her, but she's choosing to convince herself, tell herself that she can't let herself believe that he's lying because it's too painful and too scary, because the one thing that she thought she could contribute, the only purpose of her life, it wasn't fulfilled. So she's forced herself to believe Joel. And it ends the exact same way the game does. She says, okay, it cuts to black and the credits roll. So they cap off season 1. I saw some people speculating that they were going to adjust the timeline a little bit, end it on a cliffhanger. I'm glad they didn't. It would have forced things, and then it would have thrown a wrench in how season 2 goes. If they follow the game faithfully, which I have every reason to believe they will, based on how they did season 1. So I'm glad they capped it out. It came to a good conclusion for season 1. It could end here. Like, I know they're not going to. I know they're doing a season 2, but I like that story arc is basically complete as is. We've completed that chapter, the first part of the Last of Us story, and now we're moving on to season 2. So I was going through my notes. I take a stupid amount of notes as I'm watching them. As you see here, all sorts of shit. I'm just hitting some of the highlights here, and so I apologize. That's why I'm sometimes all over the place. But ultimately, the direction of this episode was great. I like that we got to see the pun book one last time after Joel tells Ellie the heavy story, and she realizes that Joel's saying she's what helped him heal from losing his daughter. And we're going through some puns, and then they get hit by a flashbang by the Fireflies. I thought that was a nice change. I liked that, other than the basically drowning in the flooded tunnels, especially since you got rid of the tunnels and all the infected in there. So, awesome episode again. Craig Mazin, Neil Druckmann, fantastic team on it. And I think that shows that's what the key is in adapting any property, whether it be a book, a video game, hell, even turning like a movie into a TV series. You get the creator of that original work and keep them heavily involved in your TV show, your movie that you're adapting. I thought that's what helped the early seasons of Game of Thrones work really well. When they were adapting the books, it was at its best. Uh, because George R. R. Martin can't finish a book to save his fucking life. Once they surpassed the books is when they started going off the rails. I mean, you could make the argument they started deviating from the books more after the original, but man, season 1 was so close to the first book that it was fantastic. And I think that's important. We've got something I'm excited for. Disney Plus is doing an adaptation of Aragon, which, but the series by Christopher Paolini, I think it's called The Inheritance Cycle, because there's 4 books. I read the first couple ones when they came out when I was growing up, and I loved them. I've recently started listening to the audiobooks again. And they did a movie adaptation that had a fantastic cast, but the movie sucked ass. It was so bad. They missed so many things from the books that it lost the heart of it and the impact. And even the great cast couldn't save it. Jeremy Irons was in it. And some of these roles, I'm like, how did you talk them into doing this? But apparently Christopher Paolini's really involved with the Disney Plus series, which is great. The one discouragement there is, besides Mandalorian and Loki, and I'd argue WandaVision too, the Disney Plus, like Marvel, Star Wars series have been pretty meh, in my opinion. And Disney, I don't know what it is, they have been struggling with CGI and special effects issues lately. They just released the new trailer for the live action Little Mermaid tonight, and the CGI looks so rough in that. So, I don't know. Hopefully they can get their shit together before they do their fantasy series with dragons. But enough of that. That does it for The Last of Us. I mentioned on the last one, I'm currently replaying the second game because I want to make a video talking about my full summary thoughts on season 1, which I did a little bit here. But I'm going to talk about that, and then I'm going to talk about at least 5 things I want to see from the game translated to season 2, or things I want to see changed. So that will have full spoilers for the game part 2, and so there will be warnings attached to that. But make sure to stay tuned for that. Subscribe to the channel so you're notified when that goes live. I don't have a time frame on it. It's whenever I can find time with work, all these other podcast episodes that I have to edit, record, everything, and I got vacation coming up, everything like that. So I have no idea when I'm gonna have time to play it, because part 2 of the game is probably at least twice as long as the first game. And you can't argue the second game, gameplay wise, is superior to the first game. The story is where it is very divisive. So I'll get into all that in my other video. Hopefully you've enjoyed these. I'm thinking I might do recaps for Yellow Jackets. Season 2 starts in 2 weeks. So I have to rewatch season 1 as well going into that. But if you're looking for a new show, if you enjoyed The Last of Us, it is different vibe, but it is, if you like The Last of Us, you're going to still watch. You're going to really like Yellow Jackets too. So that's a Showtime series. Check that out. If you just want a straight up action series, Banshee on HBO Max I'm rewatching that. That is a lot of fun. It's got Anthony Starr, who plays Homelander on The Boys, and it is brutal series about ex-con that decides to impersonate a sheriff in this town of Banshee. There is so much going on. It is a very gratuitous show, gratuitous violence, there's gratuitous sex, all sorts of stuff. It was a Cinemax series originally, but it is a very interesting, very different series that I highly recommend. So that's out there as well. So stay tuned to the new episode of the podcast on the main feed. Comes out Wednesdays, 6 a.m. Doing a couple reviews on that for a couple musical shows. And then the week after that, we're going to talk about Vivo, the animated Netflix movie with Lin-Manuel Miranda. So those episodes are Wednesday episodes. Those are out on all podcast platforms. These, as always, only on YouTube. Thanks for tuning in. Throw a comment, your overall thoughts, rating on the series so far. Throw us a like, share it if you enjoyed it, and know someone else who would. I want to grow this channel. I said in one of my other videos, my goal is to get to at least 100 subs by the end of the year. So I think that's attainable. If everyone's sharing, hell, create a second Gmail account and just subscribe again. Let's do it. I'll come up with something fun to do when we hit 100 subs. So that does it. That wraps up The Last of Us Season 1. So, thanks for joining, and don't forget to go down once more. Later.